with more is Mark Morgan, former acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the Trump administration and a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Ben, thanks for having me.
Did you ever think you'd live to see the day when the federal government abandoned control of our borders and it was left to the states to figure out a way to hold things together?
Well, I think it's a degree of chaos. I knew because during the campaign, I mean, it was clear what Biden was going to do. I mean, he announced what he was going to do, right? He was going to dismantle the network of tools, authorities, and policies we had. I just, even I back then, Vince, I didn't realize the depth and magnitude that they were going to intentionally, put on our borders to really destroy them. So they exceeded even my expectations.
Sure. Is that how you interpret this legislation that was presented to us last night as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Vince, this is not a serious border security bill. At the end of the day, this is a gift to the cartels, the Biden administration's continued open border policies, the NGOs, and sanctuary cities. And Vince, what's very frustrating, look, I don't want to impugn the integrity or intentions of Senator Lankford, but what I can tell you, though, and what I will say, is what he's saying this bill does, it's not accurate. He's being, at best, disingenuous, but at least misleading, especially on a couple of fronts, like catch and release. He continues to say that it ends catch and release, and that's just a flat-out lie.
That seems to be one of the most important elements here. The media are running around today saying that this legislation would end catch and release. And in the eyes of most people, when you hear that phrase, what that typically means is you catch an illegal immigrant crossing into our country, and then you release them into our country. That has been the practice of the Biden administration. The claim is that the legislation would end catch and release. What does it really do, Mark Morgan?
It does the opposite. It actually codifies the Flores Settlement Agreement, and that really is an order from a single judge that said if you're unaccompanied minor or your family, you cannot be detained more than 20 days, and that in parts what really started catch and release. Well, what this proposal does, not only does it not end catch and release, but it actually codifies the Flores Settlement Agreement, meaning if you're an unaccompanied minor or family, it guarantees your release. But it even goes further than that. What they're trying to do, Vince, they're actually trying to rewrite the definition of detention. So what they're saying is what they're calling ending release is non-custodial removal proceedings. Let me say that again: non-custodial removing proceedings. Most intellectually honest people means that means they're being released.
Not in custody. Exactly non-custodial means not in custody.
It's exactly, Vince. It's that simple. And so get this. So a family comes across. Let's say they are an adult comes across. They don't satisfy the credible fear claim. Well, then what they're going to do is they're going to tell American people, well, we've enrolled them in expedited removal proceedings. Oh, but while we wait for them going through the proceedings, we're going to place them in non-custodial removal proceedings, which means they're being released into the United States while they're pending the removal. It's the same thing. They're lying to the American people.
So wait, Mark Morgan, you're helping to call my attention to something that I have not dwelled on, and I should have probably, which is that it sounds to me that if this legislation were to become law, that the child trafficking crisis would dramatically accelerate.
Exactly, because I encourage everybody. There's 370 pages, but I'll give you a page number. Page 116. It'll take you 30 seconds. It actually says that aliens, this is their term, aliens referred for the non-custodial removal proceedings under this section shall be released from physical custody. So they're saying that they're ending catch and release, but the language in their own bill, page 116, says they shall be released from physical custody. And what that means is we're going to see what we saw in 2019, because they're going to continue to release families into this country. So what do you think is going to happen? They're going to continue to have the cartels and the illegal aliens form fake families to hopefully, because if they come to our border as a family, that's their guaranteed automatic passport to be released into the country, just like it has been.
Yes.
And then to your point, unaccompanied minors. So in the past 36 months, there have been 476,000 unaccompanied minors in 36 months. So the unaccompanied minors will continue to be released, and that's absolutely going to cause continued trafficking, as you just described.
Who are those unaccompanied minors released to?
So the process goes, Border Patrol releases them to HHS, and then HHS finds them a, quote, sponsor anywhere in the United States. They're automatically released, and we never hear from them again.
No, we don't. And we've seen the stories of who these sponsors often are, and they include sweatshops and basically putting these children in slave labor conditions in order to pay off debts to the cartels.
That's exactly right, Vince. There's an old saying we say that a good portion of the illegal aliens coming in, that they're being smuggled, they're also being trafficked. They just don't know it yet, especially the unaccompanied alien children. And again, 476,000 in the past 36 months. They're going to continue to release them, which will continue to incentivize them to come. And oh, by the way, that break glass removal authority, UACs aren't counted in the 5,000.
Yeah, so if Democrats, I think it's interesting, they're now using the phrase crisis to describe what's happening on the border because they're trying to transfer, they know they can't hide it anymore, so they want to transfer responsibility to Republicans. But if you were actually trying to address the crisis, wouldn't you present a piece of legislation or exercise power, if you're Biden, designed to minimize the rape, murder, drugs, and human trafficking going on our border?
Exactly, and that's another part I get so frustrated because that's exactly what the Republicans presented in H.R. 2. By the way, all Republican senators, including Senator Langsford, voted for it. And what did Chuck Schumer do? He sat on that bill for over 250 days. So I don't want to hear that the Republicans have not tried to present a congressional legislative pathway to secure the border. They did. It was H.R. 2. And it's the Democrats that refused to even put that on the floor.
Yes.
And I mean, the 5,000, first of all, remember it was Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security under then President Obama and Vice President Biden, that said 1,000 was a bad day. 1,000. We are actually now increasing that by 5 times as the threshold break glass before that additional authority can be implemented. Why are we doing that, Vince?
And that authority is still optional, isn't it? It's a kind of arbitrary. It's up to whether or not Mayorkas, of all people, wants to even invoke it.
Correct. That's right. So that's another big, I believe, intentional misdirection that's being said about this bill. So first of all, they can exempt, Mayorkas can exempt anyone they want from the emergency authority. Biden can suspend the emergency authority. Mayorkas can suspend it. And the emergency authority, it's limited in time and duration. I mean, each year it goes down to how many days they can apply it. So every time in this that you see something that looks really tough, the issue is read the next 2 or 3 or 5 pages. The exceptions overrule what looks like originally a tough rule.
Right. Yeah, like for instance, they say they want to accelerate asylum claims. They say they want to get them done in 90 days or whatever. But they include weasel language around the 90 days to suggest that as long as it's practicable or whatever. It's like if possible within 90 days, but it still might take years.
Well, that's exactly right, Ben. And then in addition to that, the 90 days, think about what they've done. So that sounds really tough on its face, but guess what they've done? In this law, it actually codifies the asylum rule that Biden is trying to push through, which guess what happens? No ICE attorneys are involved in the proceedings. So there could be and there's no evaluation by an independent judge because they're gone. They completely removed the adversarial nature. There's no cross-examined by ICE attorneys. So that rule takes all that out. By the way, there's 12 states that are actually filing suit on that rule. And what this bill does, it codifies that rule.
What do you make of this decision to say that it should be the D.C. court system that handles all of the disputes in this law?
Again, what starts to sound tough, again, this is part of the loopholes, right, that they're going through. This is nothing more than to absolutely streamline. They're going to say it limits their process, their appeal process. And that's just not true. I mean, they've put process on top of process on top of process. So once somebody is either put in non-custodial removal proceedings or they're released because they passed a credible fear, the same thing's going to happen. They're never going to be removed, and the data shows that. ICE's own life cycle report shows that if they are released, 82% of those that are released are never ever deported.
Yeah. So we're in store for a lot more of that if this thing were to ever become law. The other piece is that, this is supposed to be, they sold it to us as some sort of border fix. In reality, the only border they're actually being tough on is the one between Ukraine and Russia. They're giving $60 billion to Ukraine in a package that also provides $20 billion to bring foreign nationals into America.
That's exactly right. And think about this. People need to remember this is a supplemental. So we're asking right now for billions and billions of dollars, and then when it comes to the regular appropriations process, they're going to ask for more money. So when it comes to the border, this is supposed to be a border security bill, right? Well, $7 billion is going to go to sanctuary cities and NGOs and towards processing.
Right.
Alone $1.4 billion alone is for FEMA grants that provide shelter, and almost $40 million to provide attorney's fees, all paid for by the United States taxpayers. So it's also, I take exception that they put anything in there about border security, because the overwhelming majority of the funding is going towards anything but actual border security.
Amazing. One last thing element for you there today it seemed to me kind of an unusual statement from the Border Patrol Union. Have you seen this? They released a statement today saying that they were okay with this deal, which is interesting. They say it's not perfect, but it's better than the status quo. Let me quote from this first, and then I'll get your reaction to it. They say, since Joe Biden has been in office, Customs and Border Protection has averaged over 6,700 apprehensions per day. The vast majority have been released under a policy known as catch and release. Approximately 60% of all border apprehensions are single adults, a good number of whom are men of military age. The Border Act of 2024 will codify into law authorities that U.S. Border Patrol agents never had in the past. This will allow us to remove single adults expeditiously and without a lengthy judicial review, which historically has required the release of these individuals into the interior of the United States. This alone will drop illegal border crossings nationwide and will allow a great many of our agents to get back to detecting and apprehending those who want to cross our borders illegally and evade apprehension. While not perfect, the Border Act of 2024 is a step in the right direction and is far better than the status quo, which is why the National Border Patrol Council endorses this bill. What do you make of that view? Certainly the Border Patrol Union, no one can accuse them of being weak on the border. They certainly have wanted much better out of the Biden administration. They say it loudly every day. Do they have a point here? Are they wrong about this?
Look, generally, the union, I'm tracking what they're saying on this one, Vince. Look, and my fight is not with the union. My fight is actually against the Senate Republicans that are actually saying that this bill is the answer. But I respectfully disagree with that interpretation. I think I just don't. First of all, as we discussed thoroughly, it does not end catch and release. And part of what it's going to do is, so you're going to see about 65% are single adults. Mark my words, what we're going to see is we're going to see a shift in the demographics back to in 2019, where we had about 68% that were families and unaccompanied minors, because those demographics are going to be continued to be caught and released in the United States. So again, you're going to see more families come, and even single adults, even with the increase in bed space. The issue is what happens when those beds are full.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is even single adults are going to be placed and released on, quote, alternatives to detention. So I just don't see the language the way that they see it. And at the end of the day, the reason, look, it actually codifies many of the Biden's bad and unlawful policies.
Yep.
So it's not a compromise, and so it's actually worse than doing nothing.
And it incentivizes child trafficking, which is just absolutely detestable and a really important point. And I'm glad you brought it up, Mark Morgan. Thank you very much for your time as always, sir.